Hello and welcome to all of our viewers at Entropik podcast. Today I have here with me Emmanuel Probst. He is a global lead, brand thought leadership at Ipsos, adjunct professor at the University of California at Los Angeles, and a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author of Brand Hacks and Assemblage, The Art and Science of Brand Transformation. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you here, Emmanuel. How are you?
Stefka, thank you so much for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Very well. Excited about our conversation. Emotional intelligence has been a big topic when we talk about people, but brands.
Indeed.
So um, let's not lose any more time and dive into it. In your book, Assemblage, you discuss building brands that transform people and their world. So brands can no longer force products into us. They have to understand us, change us, and the world for good, I believe. Can you share some examples of brands that have successfully achieved this transformation from your 17 years of research
Mm.
background?
Yes, Stefka, thank you so much indeed. That's the starting point. In this new book, Assemblage, The Art and Science of Brand Transformation, is to say brands can no longer just sell products, must also transform us and the world we live in. And look, a great example that comes to mind is Belvedere Vodka in a recent ad, and the ad is Daniel Craig is on a bridge in Paris. And the ad starts as Daniel Craig as a very proper British spy in his white suit, if you will. As a reminder, Daniel Craig is the main character for James Bond. And through the ad, Daniel Craig evolves into an individual who has a leather jacket and is a lot more progressive and metrosexual, if you will. And here, the vodka, Belvedere, just supports his quest to become this individual who is again progressive and metrosexual. So that's one illustration of a brand that transforms us, and that's how it is illustrated in advertising. And another example would be Dove. Dove has been on a campaign for real beauty since I think about since 2017, and Dove would like to show people what real beauty is about. In a nutshell, the core message is to say you are beautiful as you are, and we, Dove, provide products to clean and nourish your skin. Yet you do not have to use Photoshop and filters on social media. We, Dove, encourage you to reveal your real beauty. Your skin is not perfect, and that's okay because nobody's skin is perfect. That's another example of a brand that's transformational and that is authentic, and it really encapsulates this concept of Dove is not here just to sell soap. They do so, and that's okay. But Dove is also here to transform you in from who you are to who you want to become.
Great examples where I can also see myself. I hope that our audience, our listeners can also see themselves in some of these advertisements and how they corresponded with us as personalities. If you can summarize, what are some lessons that other brands can learn from those who are already on this path?
Yeah, I think a very important reminder, and that's not a finding of a book per se, but something so important for us in marketing is to remember that the hero is not the brand. The hero are people, and the brand is here to support people, not consumers. I'm choosing this word people. The brand is here to support people in this transformation. What's important in advertising, in marketing communication, brand communication, is indeed the brand must support me to transform me and my world from who I am and who I want to become. So I think that is something that every brand, no matter what vertical, no matter what industry you're in, should absolutely keep in mind at all times.
Very good point, but that makes me think, does that make audience segmentation even more important today than it was before? Like really understanding and not just dividing them by gender or income. How important is now audience segmentation?
Yeah, thank you, Stefka. segmentation is more so relevant than ever before, exactly as you said. And to build on what you said, we can still segment according to demographics, and that is relevant, although I would argue that income is irrelevant most of the time. That's because if you want to treat yourself to a $7 or €7 frappuccino at Starbucks, it really doesn't matter whether you make $20,000, $200,000, or $2 million a year. What matters is your intention to engage with the brand. But anyway, we can use demographics, age, gender, region, household size, background, ethnic background, educational, all that. And we must also consider psychographics. So psychographics are the values and beliefs and culture of those audience groups. And last but not least, we really need to understand what I call the moment of truth, or the moment of need. That is when, why, with whom, how people are going to consume the product.
Hmm. This is a very good point. When, how, and with whom. And here comes another new element to our lives. Not so new, but with a massive boom in the past 10 years or so, with the rise of digital media and the changing consumer behaviors that this is leading to. How do you approach measuring and amplifying the connection between brands and the consumers? Are there any innovative measurement techniques or tools that you would recommend?
Yeah, historically, we would measure tactical performance. What I mean by tactical performance is you would want to understand the performance of specific creative executions across publishers, media channels, specific combinations, let's say TikTok plus Instagram, and so on and so forth. And you would want to do so at user level. The truth is, this is not really possible anymore because the media landscape is so fragmented. And
Mm.
candidly, I would argue that it's not super relevant simply because you cannot activate at that granular of a level anyway. So the future of advertising performance measurement is going to be to understand the cumulative effect of those different publishers and media channels, and maybe the sequencing. And what I call the sequencing, that is, if you advertise on TikTok and then on Instagram and then on outdoor, all
Mhm.
things being equal, the outcome will be different than if you were to advertise on TikTok and then Instagram and then outdoor, for example. So you will want to understand the cumulative effect across different media channels and its sequencing towards these audience segments that you defined before. And also, you want to understand not only the performance impact of your campaign. That is, how many products am I going to move on Monday? Sure, that's fine. But you really must also understand the brand equity, the brand awareness, and the preference and the desire for your brand. So those strategic elements in measurement are particularly important simply because the brands that do well are the ones that rely on a strong brand strategy, not simply only on performance advertising.
Cool, but here I have a follow-up question. As a consumer psychologist, what are some very interesting findings or insights you've discovered about consumer behavior that brands should take into consideration when developing their marketing and brand strategy?
Yeah, well, the frightening news is most consumers don't care about most brands. People really don't care. And there are very few brands that command true love and desire and loyalty and dedication. And in the marketing community, we always end up quoting the same brands. We're going to talk about Nike, we're going to talk about Apple, we're going to talk about Patagonia. And those brands are great. The truth is, they are few and far between. So the key finding, Stefka, from one of the key findings from this latest book is people are on a quest for meaning. People are on a quest, again, to become who they really want to be, to reveal to transform, to reveal who they really are, who they really want to become, and the brand has to support their quest. And as you said, Stefka, as a consumer psychologist, and that's really an important distinction. So thank you. Whereby I start from the standpoint of the consumer, of people, and understand what meaning these people want to access, want to fulfill, and from there build brands that are meaningful and satisfying for people, as opposed to starting from the brand and try to force feed products to people, right? So that's how I think we build great brands, by starting from people and consumers and citizens, not from the standpoint of a brand.
Really interesting perspective. I want to just bring it back to the research methodologies here. So we are talking about consumers and that we want to understand them, not to force things to them, but to really understand them and to help them in their quest to finding their real selves. So do you think that methods like multi-touch attribution or predictive analytics can help in that? Have you used such methods? Do you think these are essential for understanding the consumer's path to purchase in this new reality where we don't want to force something to them, but we want to understand what their quest looks like?
Yeah, so let's come back to both multi-touch attribution and predictive analytics, because there's a very important distinction here. For our listeners, a quick reminder is multi-touch attribution is a model to attribute the success of a campaign to various touch points, right? That's really what it is. On paper, it looks very promising. However, it's very hard to build a model that is truly holistic, just because of the fragmentation in the media landscape I mentioned earlier. What I mean by this is, if you're a brand and you have 50, 60, 70 creative executions on TikTok and just as many on Instagram, and then you have some linear TV, and then you have some CTV, and then some outdoor, and so on, and some influencers, and so on and so forth, it's just extremely hard, I would say, not possible to build a model that is really reliable. And even if you were to do so, you won't be able to do so at user level. And even if you were able to do so, you wouldn't be able to activate upon that. What I mean by this is you're going to end up with way too many segments and way too many avenues anyway. In contrast, predictive analytics, indeed, to your point, anything that has to do with behavioral economics and predictive analytics, I think is very powerful, whereby you are going to consider cohorts of people and anticipate the behavior of cohorts of people based, as we said, maybe their demographics, but also their psychographics and those moments of truth, those moments of needs, meaning the job to be done, meaning when, why, and with whom they are going to need the product. So to summarize, to be more concise, Stefka, multi-touch attribution is hard to implement and very hard to act upon. Predictive analytics and considering the brain as a prediction machine is going to become more and more relevant and more impactful.
That's great insights. Here, I want to also ask you about some of the testing methods after we have developed a product. So let's think about, we have the right path. We are taking in consideration predictive models to, let's say, produce a new campaign like the Belvedere vodka. Now, when testing it, can we rely just on the old-fashioned testing, or can we integrate here some new emotional measures, go a little bit more into System 1 insights for testing what we have already produced, believing that it is with mindset for helping the consumer in their quest of their real self?
Correct. There are a few things you can do, not so much to replace, but to augment the testing you did at an earlier stage. So once you have your creative, you could do some live creative testing, whereby you're going to want to understand how this creative performs in market. And we're not going to get too technical here, but it's the opportunity to deploy this creative among a restricted small audience and understand how it performs, so that you will be able to present the best performing creative to the best audience, really to match as efficiently as you can the creative with the audience. And the second thing to consider is all the sources of data we now have access to. So traditionally, you will do some focus groups and surveys, or some form of copy testing, which is basically, a hybrid of quant and qual, which is again very relevant and efficient and powerful and proven and reliable. And you can bring more data sets, disparate data sets to your measurement from social media listening, but also depending on your brand, depending on your vertical, your industry, you may want to consider news monitoring, you may want to consider legislative publications, you may want to consider academic publications. So again, really depends. If you're in toothpaste, you don't care so much about academic and legislative publications. However, if you are in the tobacco industry and you're transitioning towards vaping, for example, now this is going to become very relevant. Or if you're a tech brand, a social media platform, the legislative publications and news monitoring is going to become extremely important to not only measure, but hopefully predict the impact of news and legislation on your brand and your market.
And what about some technologies, methodologies like the eye tracking, facial coding, attention measurement is becoming more and more popular metric in the industry. I keep hearing discussions about converting it into a currency, so you can exchange it between the different vendors. So do you think that these instruments have their place for testing already considered new concepts, not new designs?
Yes, it's interesting what you said. You spoke about some great methodologies and methods, and then you spoke about a currency. So yes, eye tracking, attention measurement, you spoke about system one. All this has to do with behavioral measurement, behavioral analytics, which absolutely, I'm with you, paired with attitudes. How do you feel? And if you pair this with how do you behave, what you do, that is indeed a very powerful combination to determine what works and what doesn't, and to close the what we call at Ipsos the say-do gap, meaning the difference between what people might say and how they really are going to act. The word currency, I'd be a lot more I'm less keen, if you will, on currencies, just because, as tempting as it is, we see, for example, in the TV market in North America, not only in North America, but we see the limitations of the concept of a currency to trade advertising. I'll leave it at that, since it's obviously a competitor of ours handling TV measurement, at least for North America. Not that we're involved in that market anyway, but I don't want to disrespect this company and say bad things, if you will. But to make a long story short, leveraging measurement to optimize your media investments is very relevant. Doing so by combining behaviors and attitudes is very relevant. Going all the way to establishing a currency, here again, it's, I think, a very distant dream, in my opinion and in my experience.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we spoke about the new methods of finding out about the quest of our of the consumers, about what brands should go after, what you see as the next steps in research. Could you share a success story where your expertise in data onboarding and integration and activation has significantly improved the brand's performance or marketing effectiveness?
Absolutely. Reflecting on everything we discussed so far, Stefka, I can think of our client Pernod Ricard. Pernod Ricard manages who owns a portfolio of brands in the alcohol category. So Absolute Vodka, Perrier-Jouët Champagne, of course Pernod and Ricard, those are brands that are well known in Europe, and so on and so forth. And what Pernod Ricard does is, of course, some qualitative research and of course some surveys. Importantly, they consider the results in light of what they call moments of conviviality. That means not just demos, but when and why and with whom do people consume alcohol? What I mean by this is when you buy vodka, it's highly unlikely as a consumer that you're going to consider a competitive set per se. Meaning, when you buy vodka, you're not going to think, am I going to buy Absolute rather than Grey Goose or Belvedere? You are going to buy vodka towards a specific occasion. Am I going out with friends and I'm going to consume the vodka at a bar, what we call on-trade, or am I going to host a party at my house, or am I going to host a romantic dinner with a significant other, in which case I'm going to buy champagne. And here you have, and of course I cannot comment on the specific results, but in terms of the inputs and outputs, you consider those different moments of conviviality and you want to establish a brand to own the moment. It's not so much owning the market, which in all candor is very hard to do in almost all categories, but you want to own a moment.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, so we are talking about the moments with whom, where, and how people consume a product. So this leads me to ethnography research.
Mhm.
And does it make ethnography research again even more important than it has ever been? And the results from this need to really be taken in consideration a lot more seriously than ever.
Yes, and even more so when it comes to ethnography at your home. So as we know, there are several forms of ethnographies, right? You can do this at the gym and at the office, I mean, depending on what product you research, but even more so because first, as an outcome of the pandemic, people spend more time at home than before. Even though we're no longer on lockdowns, the fact is you spend more time at home than before. So your home is really the epicenter of your life now. And you're not necessarily trying to get out as much as before. Also, because the purpose of your home is now uh, more diverse. What I mean by this is your kitchen table can be your kitchen table, but maybe it's also your desk and maybe it's also the
Mm.
table where your kids do their homework and so on and so forth. So you spend more time at home and your home is the place where you achieve a wider range of missions, if you will. As such, ethnographic research is so powerful and so relevant also because, and that's really the number one upside of ethnographic research, it is to understand and to visualize, to witness how people use the product in its context.
Great. And can you give us an example from your experience where ethnography research has helped a brand uncover some insights that brought a lot of value to them?
Yeah, so Procter and Gamble has been a big fan of ethnographic research for years. Their CMO, AG Lefley used to do a lot of ethnographic research, spend a lot of time at people's home, specifically in Asia. and would attribute, and rightly so, a very large share of their success to ethnographic research. That's because as marketers, we tend to be bubbled if we stay in our offices. And if you bring people to a focus group facility or to a survey, very few of us really truly realize how do you use bleach and how do you use a sponge and dishwashing liquid and so on and so forth. You collect insights that are way more granular by realizing how people handle the product in their house. That's how, for example, you might create a bottle that you can flip, and so that it holds a certain position on your sink, right? As an example. So ethnographic research is particularly relevant in consumer packaged goods, or you can call it FMCGs, fast-moving consumer goods, as you call them in Europe.
Great, thank you for this example. So to summarize for our audience, we do see ethnography research as even more relevant than it has ever been because people spend a lot more time at home. Brands really need to understand how they use the products in reality and to really see the products in the real life of people and the real people in their real life. So this is about the consumer centricity, but there is also one very important part of your book where you talk about brands and how they should change the world as well. So not
Mm-hmm.
just change the consumer, but the world as well. Does it has to do with brand purpose? It's a buzzword. It has become a buzzword in the marketing community. What is your take on that? What is the
Yeah, yeah, sure. My take on brand purpose is, as you said, it is and it has been a buzzword. It kind of all started with that book, Start With Why, whereby what matters is really why you do it, not necessarily what brands do. Here is how it has evolved. Um, Number one, so for too long, brands just had to adopt a purpose and therefore they just jumped on the bandwagon, right, if you will. In all reality, over the last few years, and particularly since the pandemic, what we see is brands must not only claim but also demonstrate their purpose. And brands must also claim a purpose that aligns, if it's a purpose, a singular purpose, with what they do, what they can deliver. And it has to be realistic, it has to be relatable, and it has to be something that brands can demonstrate. That's all to say that yes, brand purpose is still very relevant, yet it has to make sense and it has to also impact people's lives in a fashion that's relatable, that they can hopefully even experience, right? So when a brand tells people that it's going to become carbon neutral in 2040, candidly, nobody cares. One, because we're in 2023, and so this dream is too distant. And two, if you're an airline or an airport, even by 2040, I'm not certain, and I would love to be proved wrong, but I'm not certain that you will ever become carbon neutral. So that's an example of purpose that is not credible, not believable, right? Now, if your purpose is to say you're going to make chocolate or serve coffee with respect for the producers, for the supply chain, for the farmers, now that makes a lot more sense because you can demonstrate your engagement in the local farming communities and translate this engagement in the customer experience.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we spoke about how brands should change, how they should go more consumer centric and not force products on us and go for a better world. Now I want to go back to you and how you have changed. In your first book, Brand Hacks, it became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. How has your writing evolved since you published Brand Hacks in 2019? How you will
Oh,
compare it with the new one?
thank you. That's a great question. I think this book is very optimistic, more strategic. The Brand Hacks was quite a tactical book, if you will, with a lot of case studies that are still relevant. Assemblage has a positive tone that is, we as marketers, as advertisers, market researchers, brand strategists, we have an opportunity to make a positive impact on people, on consumers, and on the world around us. Also, this book empowers you to do so. So it shows you how to do that. No matter if you have 20 years experience and you're CMO at a Fortune 500, or if you have 3 months experience and you're an intern at a local startup. As such, the book is optimistic and empowering for people. And if I may, that's really what I'm the most proud of, to tell readers, no matter where you're at in your career, you can step in, you can make a difference, you can have a positive impact on your clients, on your associates, on your boss, on your colleagues. And this book shows you how to do so.
Well, I would say that you are uh, doing what you're saying and not just saying it in the book. So you are with your readers, together with them on their quest to be the better researchers that they really want to be. To conclude this conversation, please tell us one last thing that will inspire us to become assemblers.
Hmm. Well, the assemblers, so we should all be assemblers whereby we should all create brands by combining those different attributes that might be personal, social, cultural attributes. Here's something I want to share that's optimistic. Take a step back from branding and advertising and consider artists. Consider the likes of Jeff Koons. Consider the likes of, in hip hop music, DJ Khaled or Pharrell Williams or DJ like David Guetta, for example. And in cooking, consider the likes of Gordon Ramsay or Alain Ducasse, depending on what region of the world you live, right? Those names will resonate with you to different extents. Consider someone like Picasso. Consider someone like Da Vinci. And all those people, what they all have in common is while they are artists we admire, they are talented, but not so much the in the way we think they are. What I mean by this is they are talented because they assemble, they combine samples, they transform existing materials, and they deliver on an artistic vision. But they don't necessarily do the work themselves, and that's fine. What the assemblers do is deliver on a vision and deliver their art through this vision. And as parting words, that's what I want to share with the audience, that your opportunity is not to try to reinvent the wheel. Very few people and very few brands truly invent brand new products. You can achieve so much and better by repurposing, by combining, by copying, by transforming what is already in existence. So you should continue to admire Picasso and Jeff Koons if you do, and keep in mind that they're talented because of their ability to deliver on their artistic and strategic vision, and you can do the same in branding.
Thank you. That was really insightful. Maybe I will summarize it with the title of a book I read 2 years ago, Still Like an Artist. That
Oh,
was,
exactly. Oh, exactly. Austin Kleon. Yes,
yes,
that's
yes.
exactly it.
I,
Yeah,
I was trying to remember the
yeah,
author. Thank you for that.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So, still like an artist, be the researcher you are, but still like an artist. Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for this insightful conversation. It was a real pleasure.
Likewise, thank you so much, Stefka and team, for having me, and thank you to our listeners today.